So once again, my name is Troy Wolf. I am a targeted individual. Today's date is December the 10th, 2018. I'm going to start each of these 4 recordings on my story off with the witness affirmation. I, Troy Wolf, do solemnly affirm that the evidence that I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. This first recording, I am going to cover the dates 2003 to 2006. In this particular recording, it is basically going to be getting involved with the wrong individual and then being put on a watch list. So 2003 started off, I worked at a major warehouse chain. They sell all sorts of stuff from food to box goods and whatnot. In the fall of 2001 to 2004 is my employment time frame with them. I had met this individual, and for lack of a better term, I'm just going to call this person Stacy. I began to date Stacy in the winter or in the fallish winter time frame of 2003. It quickly became apparent that this individual wasn't all there. On several occasions, this person had asked me to partake in drugs and whatnot, and that wasn't my background, that wasn't my history. I had no interest in that. Now, the interesting thing about 2003 as well is that I had had a conversation with a coworker at this warehouse about potentially and possibly someday having a child. Rumor had spread around the warehouse, and this is where this individual approached me. And this person was also a member of management, this Stacy, and talked to me basically about having a kid. This is in essence how we got together and began dating. Also in 2003, at the time, I was living kind of just bouncing around, living with the family and wanting to get out. My youngest brother had to fulfill a lease on a duplex, and so in 2003 I had moved in with him. During the year 2003, this individual would vacillate greatly from this Stacy, from wanting to talk to you to not wanting to talk to you, having a problem with you one day and then you'd be fine the next. And it wasn't really till we started dating that I recognized that clearly there was an issue. I recall one night coming out of the warehouse, and all 4 of my tires on a Honda Accord had been slashed. Clearly this was a situation from the ex-husband, or the ex-boyfriend I should say, that she had had. Because prior to that, about a week or 2 prior to that, he was out in the parking lot of this warehouse, basically eyeballing me. And like I said, within a week or 2, all 4 of my tires on my car were slashed. Also, problems were beginning to develop once again from this individual, where one night I had left the warehouse. It was actually early in the morning. I was headed down Highway 41. I had just passed under, it would be County Road A here, and my car completely just shut off. I mean, no lights, nothing on the dash, nothing at all. Interestingly enough, doing 60 miles an hour, 65 at the time, I believe, I had managed to turn the key off, turn it back on, and then the car would start up. What I had noticed sitting on the overpass was a vehicle. So in 2003, this was the first attack on my vehicle with EMP. It was also in the news back in that time frame that they were using or trying to use EMP as a way to disable people's vehicles. When they wanted them to stop, they would just shoot them with an EMP stream, and the vehicle would shut off. So that was 2003. 2004, my brother and I had moved across town to a street called Tallulah, and we had lived there for 1 year. In 2004, the relationship had ended with this Stacy. Once again, like I said, I didn't really care much for the lifestyle. The up and down behavior and pattern was beyond crazy. It was, come on over, let's have a date night, and you get there, and then within 30 minutes kick me out. So it wasn't something that was very appealing, and just decided to end it. 2004, after the tumultuous up and downness of the relationship, I decided to leave the warehouse company, and this is where I went for the first time down the road trucking. That was actually in May of 2004. After all the training and whatnot, I was on the road and certified for driving actually in June. When I left the warehouse, I had ended up staying in friends and contact with a number of individuals that continued to work there. Must be about 5 or 6 in total that I would talk to on a regular basis when I was out driving on the road. There was a weekend when I'd come off the road and two of the individuals from the warehouse and myself went out drinking for the night. This is basically when the big event occurred and when things changed and altered in my life. I guess you'd want to say forever, for the last 16 years. The following morning, after a night out of drinking, I got a call from this Stacy wanting to know if I was off the road and if I was home. I said, yeah, I was home. Well, this individual was awful pissed off at me and said that the police was over at their house in the night. Then all of a sudden on the phone conversation, a friend of hers grabbed the phone out of her hand and said, I'm coming over to kick your ass. And not understanding what was even going on, I was like, well, okay, let's go. The interesting thing is that the guy or her never showed up at the house. Now, how she knew I was over the road could have been through talks with individuals at the warehouse. I'm not sure. And as for where I lived, I'm not exactly sure either how she found that out. The next morning, or I should say that same morning, about 3-4 hours after that phone conversation, the police showed up at my door. 2 of them. Telling me that I could not park my work truck in front of the house. And I exclaimed or asked the question, why? And they said, you were too far off a truck route. And I said, well, the truck route's only 2 blocks away. Their comment was, well, it's too far away. Move your truck. Well, I proceeded to explain that there are other trucks in this city that are a mile or 2 away from a truck route. And the police officers really kind of just got an attitude problem with me and said, I don't care what you're saying. Either move the truck or we're going to have a problem. So I just kind of put my hands up and said, okay, that's fine. I'll move the truck. Not a problem. I ended up having to return the truck to the Green Bay facility on a weekly basis or monthly basis whenever I came off the road, and that's fine. What I had noticed on Tallulah is people began driving by in the middle of the night, all hours of the night, laying on the horn. And being the fact that my bedroom was closest to the road, it was a constant horn honking and waking you up. And you know, when you were off the road, you listened to it all day as you were sitting in the living room watching TV. On my drive in 2004 between Appleton and Green Bay, I noticed a heavy presence of being followed, and that just increased. That was a situation of the minute I would leave Appleton and hit the highway on up to my exit in Green Bay, and then subsequently on the main streets in Green Bay, followed all the way to my job. It didn't matter if I took back roads or anything like that. It was the same individuals, the same vehicles would essentially follow me to and from work. And that's when that all started really picking up. Within about a month or two of being at this job, a month or two also then after having gone out with these people to a bar, I received an interesting voicemail on my phone. It was Stacy's voice. She had basically left a message in the middle of the night, and her message was, "You're so fucked. You're so fucked." So a note in regards to that voicemail message, I had kept it on my phone. I had returned to those two individuals that I went out drinking with that night, and to confirm it, I had asked, "Is this in fact Stacy's voice?" They both agreed that it was, and the question, of course, was, why was that message left? So I explained the story. They weren't sure what was going on with this person, with Stacy, and just kind of blew it off. Magically, within 2 to 3 months, that message was deleted from my phone before I could make an actual hard copy of it. So when I had come off the road at a later date, I had called up this Stacy regarding the voicemail that was left. I had asked what was the purpose of that, and what does that mean? The response I had gotten out of this Stacy is, I reported you basically to all the police departments in the area. Now, if you take all the communities in the Fox River Valley here, there's quite a few. I don't know, 5, 6, 7. There's quite a few of them. And when I had inquired why and over what, there was absolutely no response on the phone. Basically, she just hung up. As time went on, I started to notice really kind of strange stuff. Of course, the honking of the horns continued. But in essence, things were beginning to change on the home front life as well. I came off the road one time to pay my cell phone bill and this, that, and the other, and my brother had gone and split the phone bill. And I thought that was kind of odd, because basically we got one bill, and we kind of divvied up the cost of it, and that's the way we had gone on this cell phone plan. But not anymore. Now the bill was being split. I called a friend one day from this warehouse, and I kind of explained what was going on in the background and what involvement I had had with Stacy. This individual had warned me well before we started dating to stay away from Stacy, that she's just bad news. But she stopped me basically in talking to her, and she said, I've got to say something to you, Troy. And that is, I've overheard something, and I want to ask you if it's true. And then she kind of stopped and paused for a moment and said, look, she said, I'm not going to ask the question. It's really none of my business. This individual as well that I was talking to on the phone also later, in a later conversation, told me that this Stacy might have started up a relationship with a Outagamie County sheriff. I kind of put 2 and 2 together, and that kind of explained the tailing or the harassment that seemed to begin and started. Also the fact that the comment was made about being reported to all the police. Also, the weird thing that had happened in 2004 is that my brother started asking me questions about GPS units and possibly getting a Garmin unit. So I found that a little bit strange. We talked about it briefly, and I wasn't real sure of the technology and how all this stuff worked. Moving on to 2005, out on the road driving, I had noticed that my CB was starting to be tampered with, that I could only get conversations once in a while, And when it came to heavy conversations on the CB, all of a sudden it would either completely just go out, so it was dead air, or it would be a fuzzy noise. Early in February, I was pulled over in Iowa in 2005. The truck was shut down. After listening to my conversations on the CB, they found out that my truck was overweight, proceeded to follow me all the way across the state, and when I hit the first open scale is where they had actually shut the truck down. But they didn't shut the truck down for being overweight. They shut the truck down because by this time I had been out there the length of my instructional permit. And they had decided to say, you know, shut me down and say, look, until you fix your expired license, we can't let you drive. What was interesting about that whole story is when I had hooked a ride with a co-truck driver, a fellow truck driver that I had gone to school with, was in the area, and he picked me up and took me to a hotel, waiting for a ride to get back home to fix my license. I had showed up at a hotel. A gentleman in a vehicle behind our truck came into the parking lot as well, and he had government plates on his car. I went to the front desk. I had checked in, paid for the room, had left, was heading up the stairs to get to my room, and I heard this conversation between this gentleman and the guy at the front desk. The guy that you had just checked in, I need a room right next to his. I need to keep an eye on him. So, interestingly enough, what was going on in the hotel room is basically I threw my stuff on the bed and decided to take a shower because I had a 5-hour wait, 6-hour wait for the family to show up to pick me up. This gentleman in the other room sat with his ear on the wall, listening to everything that was going on. This person also had an individual with them. And you could overhear their conversations about what is he doing now, he's taking a shower, where is he going, this, that, and the other. Interesting thing is the family had shown up. I had grabbed all my stuff and headed down to hop in the vehicle outside the front entrance of the hotel, and here comes this individual, comes down, lights a cigarette, and proceeds to stand and watch everything that I was doing. After I had fixed my license issue and problem, I had returned to the truck. The trucking company was awful mad at me. They were pretty pissed off that I had returned to the truck without contacting them first. In doing the pre-trip on the truck and getting ready to move the truck, I had learned that my Sirius satellite radio was now broke, sitting on the dash. Running through Chicago in 2005, I began to hear comments over the CB commenting, saying that I'm doing drugs, that this guy's a nut job, and this guy's a bad driver, and he basically needs to have his truck shut down. I also began to hear conversations from truckers over the CB stating that this guy is under heavy surveillance and to keep an eye on him. This is when I had noticed in 2005, truckers began over the CB playing these monkey noises, these loud screeching monkey noises. Also, truckers would pass me and they would have monkey faces drawn on the back of their trailer doors. It was interesting, some of the major cities, when I would go through them, you would hear over the CB, you know, we need spotters. We need spotters over here. It seemed by 2005 I was being tracked everywhere I went, small cities, big cities, across the border into Canada. It didn't matter. One weekend, I remember this, I came off the road from, I think, being out for about 4 weeks. And I was for years heavy into Yahoo Chat. So I had hooked up my computer, got it all set up, grabbed something to drink, went to sit on Yahoo Chat, and all of a sudden across my screen comes a big notification in red lettering that says all your communication is being monitored. So of course I had just logged out of Yahoo Chat, and needless to say, looking back at it 16 years ago I haven't gone back since. I remember in 2005 I was stopped one night in Florida. And you parked technically behind this this trucker's garage, and it was kind of back off the beaten path. The next thing I know, I saw some guy making his way up alongside my truck, and he tried to almost force his way into the truck. He first was pulling on the door handle. I opened up the window a crack to see what he had wanted, and he crawled up the steps of the truck and actually just tried coming into the truck. So at the time I had called my boss, or STL, at the trucking company and told them that I know I'm out of hours, but I have to move the truck. It's not safe sitting here. Interesting, about 2005, this individual, this Stacy individual, began showing up out on my runs. Two very notable ones, of course, were crossing the border from Michigan into Canada. This individual comes up behind me and passes the border, waving out the window, her arms out the window at me around the same time, driving this little red compact car. Another incident that had transpired as I was driving through downtown St. Louis. And this Stacy individual was out the window of the car taking photographs. And the flash was so blinding that it was very difficult. It made it very difficult to drive through downtown St. Louis. Interestingly enough, in another incident in 2005, and I got to speed this up, I heard over the CB some guy was telling some chick to shut up, that all this bitch out here, and this is his words, was trying to do was try to get this truck driver in trouble. And I could never hear any of the conversation. I just basically heard what he had said. 2005, the hounding continued, and it really started to ramp up, following me into the showers, into the bathrooms, and anytime I was at rest stops. There was a time when I had driven down from the Green Bay area, had stopped in the outskirts of Chicago and ran into a rest stop to take a bathroom break. When I had come back out to the truck, both doors of the truck were just sitting wide open. This is when I began to hear over the CB, good recon, good recon. After several trips through Chicago, they began commenting on what I was doing in the truck. So obviously now I knew that there was a camera or cameras placed now in the truck. Comments such as, he's looking for it, he can't find it, now he's doing this. One day I had gone through Indiana, and I was told from my STL to change out my computer because they were having problems locating me, and where I was at times on the GPS wasn't showing up on their computer. What had happened one time when I had changed the computer out, I went through the service bay, had the computer changed, went and parked, and in the middle of the night somebody came and banged on my door. This supposedly was the mechanic telling me he needed the numbers off my computer, that he had forgotten to get them. So he proceeded to go into the side compartment of the truck and write down the numbers off this computer, which is a Qualcomm. And I'm not sure what he was doing with the numbers. All I know is that a co-driver or a co-passenger or passenger in his vehicle, he handed that list to. I had gotten a call one day in 2005 from my STL wondering if I was in Minnesota. And I said I was. And then I was asked if I had gone to the mall. And I said, no, I'm obviously picking up and delivering items. I'm not at the mall. Well, apparently this STL and this trucking company got a phone call from a girl stating that a Schneider driver, or a trucking company driver, had raped her at the mall in Minnesota. So I found that pretty interesting, that had transpired, and I was nowhere near a mall. Once again, in 2005, I began to hear fellow truck drivers over the CB would follow me and then would come up alongside me and say, I'm calling the police on you. And it was just basically blatant, outright harassment. Then as 2005 continued, I overheard people talking on the CB about the music I was listening to and the food I ate and this, that, and the other. Towards the end of my time with the trucking company, what I ended up doing was staying with the truck as much as possible. Watching how many times the truck was entered, I figured it was time to, try to stay as tightly with the truck as I can. Basically, in a 2-week, 3-week period, you'd step out of the truck just long enough to take a shower, and that one shower in the 3 weeks is all you'd end up doing. So eventually I left the trucking company, and that is Schneider, in 2005. Back home on the home front, my brother and his friend began showing up, because what had happened is after I had left the trucking company, technically I was homeless. I had decided to live out of the truck and then make that my life. Well, when that didn't work out, I technically had no place to stay, so I was staying temporarily out of my car. What I had found out is that my brother and my friend, and his friend, began showing up in the middle of the night. I used to stay at my step-grandfather's shop, and the next thing you know, I would see their vehicle in the middle of the night, a house or two over. I would also stay at a truck stop in the area, and then they'd be showing up there as well. In a motel that I was staying at, that I ended up getting to, I met a guy that informed me that on my vehicle there was GPS, and that he knew this. I didn't think too much of it. Obviously, he didn't know where it was planted or put, and I just kind of blew it off, although I knew the hounding was going on. In 2005, the vehicle that I was driving magically blew up, and it was the water pump. So in starting a new job, I then bought a Ford Thunderbird. In a roundabout way from another individual at another motel, was also told then somebody had shown up and had put a GPS unit on that vehicle. Towards the end of 2005, I met a person, and I will name this individual Katie. Katie had come to me and basically told me her life story and told me that she was in the process of getting a divorce. To kind of tie that together, Katie's ex-husband, at the time was husband, at this motel, they were still involved. The husband was actually going off to jail, is my understanding. Well, this husband had, or now ex-husband, had a friend staying at the motel as well. When this friend found out the involvement with this Katie, one night I was walking out the door of the motel. He walked by me, and his comment was, "You're going out." Now, I'm not sure why the comment was made at the time. I just kind of looked at him like, well, here we go. I'm at a motel. This is probably just another nut job. Until later, when I found out what had happened. At this particular motel in 2005, my personal stuff, began being rifled through. I remember I had a lockbox there that I had brought one day. When I had come home from work, one of my dental tools out of my carry bag had been taken and used to try to pick this lock, and they actually broke the dental tool off in the lock. It wasn't much later that I had found out that my motel room was being rooted through. One day I had gone to change the sheets on the bed, and when I lifted up the mattress, under there was a spoon and a crack pipe. So in that guy's comment of me going out, I began to put together what he was trying to do. I subsequently later found out that this particular motel on occasions was raided by the police, and everybody's room was searched through. Also, 2005, I had left that motel and went to a different one. I was staying there for the weekend, and what I had done is I had left my computer on and went to dinner. When I had come back, I noticed that over half of my personal files had been deleted. In backing up to the car that had blown up by the water pump, I had the car towed to an auto shop. What's interesting about that is as I went to walk away, the owner of the shop made a comment to the tow truck driver. He says, well, leave the car here. There's somebody coming to get the device off the car. I turned and looked at the individual and just shook my head like, whatever that means, assuming that was GPS. Interestingly enough, as well, in 2005, I had stopped by my mother's house. My eldest brother was there, along with my youngest brother. And a comment, I was standing there and overheard. My oldest brother had said, hey, remember, to my youngest brother, do you remember when we went to the bar and you had shown up with that girl? And the interesting thing about that, of course, is what was going on in the background is that this Stacy, to be on the inside, was obviously picked up with my youngest brother at the time. Everybody looked at each other. My mother, my eldest brother, my youngest brother, they all looked at each other and just kind of closed their mouths. I actually confronted my mother about the issue, and her response to me was, and I basically asked, is my youngest brother seeing this Stacy? And her response to me out in the parking lot was, don't worry about it. It isn't going to last. I then went on to work for a garbage company, and that's where I, of course, had bought the Ford Thunderbird. Within 2 months of being at the garbage company, all the trucks were outfitted with GPS units. When I inquired why, their explanation to me was, well, we were going to do this for a while. We just now got around to it. I remember one day sitting and waiting to work. I think it was about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. A coworker was sitting there with a police scanner in his hand. And his comment in response to me was, hey, I'll sell you this police scanner for $50. And I kind of looked at him oddly and I said, why would I buy a police scanner? He said, because all the information that's being broadcast over this police scanner is about you. So I thought, and he kind of chuckled about it, and I just kind of laughed it off a bit like whatever, and left it. I remember a time at a motel in 2005, a woman had showed up at my door to serve some sort of papers. When she got to the door and it banged down and she asked me if I was so-and-so, I said I wasn't. And then she proceeded to grill me on who I was and what I was doing there, and are you sure you're not this person? And basically I told her, I said, you better go down to the office and check with them, because I am not the person that you're supposedly looking for. 2006. It's interesting, I began to date this Katie, and we looked for a place 2005, 2006. This Katie was going to be released on the GPS monitor from jail. I had a conversation with my mother because my youngest brother had also been on GPS as well, and I said to her, I said, my understanding on having somebody come and live with you is that you are supposed to have a background check and an interview with this Outagamie County Sheriff's Department. What I will basically state is that I never was called, and I was never given an interview or had a background check. My mother had made that comment as well. She said, that's very strange. She said, because anybody that had to come visit or wanted to come visit your younger brother, I had to put on the list that they were going to show up. So I find that very interesting that that went on. That was a major event that had transpired, kind of showing that the infiltration of the mole. The first time that Outagamie County showed up for a visit and spoke with this Katie, it wasn't about Katie. It was basically about me and what I was doing and interests that I had and whatnot. Her response at that time was, he doesn't do anything, officer. He goes to and from work. We sit and watch movies. And that's almost word for word what she had said. I was also told at the time in the beginning of this that I was going to have my own private space, that I could lock my own bedroom door and keep my own private personal information in there. Well, that turned out not to be the case. The time the police had shown up, they wanted the door open. They wanted to rifle through my stuff on top of it. And when they found a couple bottles of alcohol, I had to remove them immediately from the premise. I remember one day, this Katie and I now living together, I had run downstairs to get my checkbook. As I went down the stairs, I overheard the landlord make a comment to this Katie, well, who's supposed to be watching him? And this Katie piped up and said, I am. Another indication of the presence of a mole. This individual, this Katie, also claimed that they had stopped doing any kind of drugs. It's interesting that when we began to have problems, and I will explain that, that's coming up here, this person got very nervous and wanted basically to make sure that they could stay and claim that they were pregnant. And obviously that turned out to be a big lie. This Katie and I, began to have problems. It's interesting, one day I was at work and we were on the phone together about splitting up. And we had gone back and forth on the phone. Interestingly enough, I had overheard the phone conversation being broadcast over the work radios. I got piped up during the conversation and basically says, I've heard enough. With some of my coworkers, I had asked if they had heard the conversation, and a good friend of mine that I went to high school with actually said yes, that he had heard what was going on and heard the conversation. At the time, my youngest brother was working there and made no response to if he heard it or if he didn't hear it. Strange things began to happen 2006 with the phone conversations. They were all being recorded. Every time you had a phone conversation, quickly popping noises would come on the phone line. I was being asked a ton of yes and no questions and looking for yes and no responses out of my mouth. It took about 2 years to figure out that scenario and what was going on before I stopped responding in yes and no responses. Like I said about the phone, all of a sudden you would start hearing a buzz on the phone, especially when you were going to give a response, and that, I'm assuming, is the recording part of it. I was standing one day at this duplex that I had rented with this Katie, and you overheard somebody make a comment about me showering and whatnot. So that is when I learned of cameras that had been placed in the bathroom. There was a day in an incident where there were keys left and she had locked her keys in the house. This is where enters the mechanic. She had gone out to my place of work to pick up my copy or my key to get herself back in, and where she had run into this mechanic. From then on out, basically, the mechanic had an attitude problem with me. His comment the following day is that he would have gladly gone over to the house and kicked the door in. Problems really began to pipe up at this duplex. I was starting to have $300 a month utility bills. There were times when clothes, brand new clothes with the tags still on them, were disappearing, and movies that I had been sorting started disappearing. One night I had gone into the kitchen. I was looking out over the back patio, and there was a guy's silhouette on the back patio in the moonlight. There was times when I had fallen asleep in 2006 in the bedroom to all of a sudden having, I would assume, a recorder of tape recorder played of people having sex while I slept. It wasn't that long after I had found that this mechanic was now parking away from this duplex 2 blocks on his lunch break. And there was a time that I had shown up in the middle of my route and stopped at the house. When I had come in the house, this Katie was standing there shaking like a leaf, acting very, very nervous. Once again, like I said, they outfitted the trucks with GPS, and they now must have got them all turned on, because I was then hounded, in essence, from then on. This Katie was on the GPS monitor, and I had asked her to leave partway through our lease. The comment in response to me is, well, I can't. The only option I have is to go back to jail. Later on in 2006, this mechanic began making comments about my private phone conversations with Katie. He would comment on the conversation that I had just the day previous. And on and on and on. And he really started to cop an attitude. If I had something wrong with my truck, I would go to the back of the line for it being fixed. When I had asked this Katie individual that I was living with about the mechanic, the response was, yeah, years ago that I had known this person. One time in 2006, after several arguments and problems with this Katie, I remember one day turning away from her to walk back downstairs. And this is where I got a cold cock to the neck, or a fist to the neck, which subsequently swelled to the size of a baseball in my neck. What I had noticed also in 2006 at this duplex is stuff started disappearing from the garage. I mean, small stuff. I mean, WD-40, cans of it. Stuff was being broken, you know, the blower, lawn blower. A lot of comments you begin to hear over the work radios and stuff like that. It was basically all lies and bullshit, in my opinion. But like just complete made-up stuff. I remember one day I had a leaky tire on this Ford Thunderbird, and I was carrying a compressor around with me. This particular mechanic kept watching everything that I was doing. I remember one day coming off the route, going back to my car. Of course, the tire had deflated a bit. I went to use the air compressor, and now this day the air compressor was broke. Once again, the mechanic in 2006, he just kept making comments about the relationship, about me, this, that, and the other. What I noticed in 2006, they started to keep me busier and busier. It wasn't uncommon for me to work anywhere between 10, 15, 16, 17, 18 hours a day. Almost like keeping me preoccupied to never get back home. It seemed almost as if they were directing my lifestyle, my day and life and night, and basically that's it. I remember a time in 2006 I had bought this Katie individual a ring. Well, what I subsequently learned is that this ring ended up at the pawn shop. Another opportunity or scenario that had happened is I gave this person $100, came back to me and told me they lost it. This is when technically the first break-in at my storage unit, which was about 4 miles from where I'd lived. In this particular break-in, they took a drill press, a saw, a snow shovel that I had altered and put a stainless steel strip on so it would never wear out. And of course, some personal items had been taken. So really now, this is the years 2003 to 2006. And you can begin in these years to see how things are starting to come together. And my monitoring had started, and that was ramping up. So stay tuned for the years 2007 to 2010, where I will be covering digging deeper and another attack on my health.